Welcome to Living Transplant,
the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the transplant program at Toronto General Hospital
and brings you open and honest conversations about the transplant experience.
My name is Courtney, and I'm the communications specialist for the Center for Living Organ Donation.
And my name is Brittany. I'm a bedside nurse in the Ajmera Transplant Center.
Full disclosure, we are not physicians.
No, and we are not here to give you medical advice.
Think of us like your guides through the world of transplant as we know it.
Whether transplant is your past, present, or future, your passion, or your curiosity,
Living Transplant will show you the world of transplant like you've never seen it before. I loved this interview. Thank you so much for inviting Mally on. And then Mally, thank you for inviting Vino on. I had no idea we were going to listen to such an incredible story.
When I had thought about getting someone from Heart Transplant on, I automatically thought of Mally. And when I approached her and told her, hey, we have this show and we want to have you on it, she automatically thought of Vino. She said, I have a patient that has just recently had a heart transplant and really wants to give back to the program and is just so grateful for everything that he's gone through. And I think he'd be perfect for the show. So I didn't know too much about him, didn't know too much about his story, but I knew it'd be good. She kind of briefed me a little bit about what it would be like or what his story was like, but yeah, emotional.
Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
Yeah, really emotional. I'm starting to feel like I'm made of stone. I need to cry at some point on the podcast. I have a heart, I swear.
It's like that. I mean, hearing his story, I can't help but not. Like that was almost like a moment that I had, the same moment that I had it with the interview with Michael, almost identical. I was like, pull it together, Brittany, pull it together. Like, yeah, seriously.
It was, to think about what him and his wife went through, their whole family really is crazy. I'm always amazed at how resilient transplant recipients are. And then the fact that, he's only a couple months out of transplant and he's like, I want to give back to the program however I can. Like
he's ready to just give it. Yeah. He's ready to just help. How can I ready? He's like, how can I help?
Yeah.
How can I be an advocate for organ donation? It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible.
Really cool. And I learned so much about hearts. I didn't know much about heart transplant. It was a good tester for me because I feel like we didn't get too technical, so I didn't get completely lost, but I somehow managed to turn myself around within the first 5 minutes anyway, but I learned a lot though.
I know. I actually, like I said, I don't know too much about heart transplants and I thought she'd be perfect to explaining it. So I'm really excited for everyone to hear this one. Sit back, get your box of tissue close.
Yes. Get that box of tissue.
Just like every other episode. If you're anything
grab those
like
tissues for a change.
Yeah. If you're anything like me, not Courtney.
Heart of stone over here.
Heart of stone. A heart of stone, and I'm a heart of, I don't know, mush. But anyways, hope you like it. Welcome back to Living Transplant. Our guest today is Mally Worme and Vino Ramachandran. Mally, what is your connection to transplant?
So I am a heart failure, heart transplant fellow, which means that I finished my cardiology training and exams, and now I am focusing my specialization specifically in heart failure and heart transplant. And so I spend my days at the Toronto General Hospital seeing patients both pre and post-transplant, and also helping work patients up for the consideration of transplant.
And Vino, what's your connection to transplant?
I got a heart transplant on November 8th. So just past 4 months.
Amazing.
Wow, pretty recent.
Congratulations.
Yep. Thank you.
So Mally, what made you want to start in heart transplant?
So approximately 3 years ago now, I had to choose what area of cardiology I was going to specialize in. And at that time, I was planning to be an interventional cardiologist. And all of us have to do a month of heart failure, heart transplant training in our general cardiology training. And at that point, I met the group of approximately 10 heart failure, heart transplant staff at Toronto General. And it's the one field in cardiology that is dominated by women, interestingly, which is unusual for the cardiology world. And in that month, I just met so many inspiring ladies who were so in charge and had accomplished so much. And I developed so many role models that month that I decided, okay, this was my new career path.
That's
Wow.
so cool.
That's really cool.
There
Why
were-
that is?
You know, I think that at TGH, one of the reasons why there's so many women is because there's Dr. Ross, the head of the heart failure, heart transplant program originally. She, I think, when she started, became a role model for so many women, and therefore women have followed in her footsteps. I think that's probably one of the main reasons. It's also, I would say, a field where you spend a lot of time with your patients. There's a lot of getting to know your patients super well, a lot of really close follow-up. And for me, I wonder if that's also one of the reasons that drew me to heart failure, heart transplant, that human connection that you make with your patients.
So it's like Heather paved the way for all these amazing women to come and follow.
Yeah, I think it also goes to show that like representation really does matter. I feel like there's lots of talk all the time about how are we going to diversify, whether it's healthcare or whatever sector that you're in. And I think, that example is a perfect reason why representation is really important.
Absolutely. Seeing someone in a field that you feel as if either you can identify with or who you feel is there to support you and to encourage you, to let you know that you're capable and this is a possibility for you,
Yeah, for sure.
So Vino, how did you come about meeting Mally? Or do you remember meeting Mally?
I do, under the most unfortunate circumstances, but I'm so glad I met Mally. I checked myself into TGH. I'd been diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy for 10 years. And I was living a pretty normal lifestyle, all things considered. That month, I just wasn't feeling the best. And I knew the new drug therapy wasn't helping. And I'd just been recently hospitalized. And I said, I need to go to Toronto General because I'd been consulting with them, with Dr. Ross 10 years ago. Who, it's funny that Mally says that. When my wife met her, I remember my wife saying how inspiring she was. So it kind of hits the nail on the head right there with how she described Dr. Ross. And I knew that they could help me more than when I went to the other hospitals with the heart failure team that they had. When I checked myself in, it was just the early onset of some of the heart failure symptoms that I've seen with like swelling in the feet and etc. And I didn't think I was in dire straits until a week or two after. And actually, I was supposed to be checked out on the Monday. And on the Sunday evening, I started feeling really unwell. And Mally had come to see me because she was on call and knew something was up. And it was just very simple. It was like I felt a little dizzy. I felt a little bit off. And she was on the cautious side and moved me to the CCU because she thought something was wrong and had a few tests run. And unfortunately, for some reason, on Friday, my heart was doing generally well enough. But on that Sunday night, it fell off a cliff. And I was in end-stage heart failure pretty quickly. And I met Mally, and that night we talked about me possibly needing a transplant immediately. I can't even explain all the emotions that went through at the time, but I remember she had worked that whole day. She'd stay the entire night there, went home for like 2-3 hours and came back in the morning by 7 to check up on me. So that was me meeting Mally for the first time.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And Mally, is that really common with heart failure? I think I was saying to you before we started recording that I'm mostly living donation, so I'm more familiar with liver and kidney transplant, where with, not all of the diseases that kind of lead to those organs to fail, sometimes you have like a bit of warning. Is Vino's situation typical? Do most people just or most people who experience heart failure, does it happen just like that?
I would say there's quite a variety of presentations. What I think was special about Vino's case is that in our younger population, so I won't disclose Vino's age, but he's younger, what tends to happen is your body can compensate for a much longer period and you have a lot more reserve. And so you can keep chugging and not necessarily notice how sick you are until you're right at that precipice. And so we always are more worried about younger patients who look like they're getting a bit sicker because quite often their decompensation will be quite rapid. And that night when I met Vino for the first time, his symptom that really concerned me, yes, he was dizzy, but he was also super nauseous. And that was a concern for me that his right heart was starting to fail. And certainly when he got down to the CCU, it was obvious he was in cardiogenic shock and his heart was no longer perfusing his organs adequately. Usually when patients with end-stage heart failure are going towards transplant, I would say that the majority of those patients have had admissions to hospital for decompensated heart failure, and a high percentage of the patients I've seen go on to require advanced therapies for their heart failure, including transplant, have actually presented in cardiogenic shock. So where they're really at the end of what their heart can do, and they need to be supported on life support medications until we can get them either a mechanical heart or a heart transplant.
Wow, that's so much to take in, especially if it just kind of comes in Vino's situation out of nowhere. Did you know a lot about heart transplant prior to this? Do you remember when you first heard the words heart transplant and what that felt like?
Oh yeah, I do. It was 10 years ago. A bit emotional to think about still, but I know my wife did most of the research because I was like too scared to even think about it. And I met Dr. Ross, and she said, things can go three different ways. It could stay stable for years. It can get worse immediately, or sometimes it can improve on rare cases. And with the condition that I had 10 years ago when I was diagnosed, the prognosis was about, I think she had said about 3 to 5 years, I'd probably need a transplant. And then when we did when the information available at that time, I don't recall it well because my wife's the one that did most of the research on it because I didn't want to. And I remember the numbers weren't good. It was a bit scary. And I kind of like closed the door on it. It's almost like felt like a death sentence to be diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy at the time.
Right. I'm sorry. I missed that then that you were diagnosed years before. My bad. Like I said, I don't have a medical background. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow.
But even though he was diagnosed a decade before, correct me if I'm wrong, Vino, but you had a relatively normal life with minimal symptoms for most of that decade on medical therapy, right?
Absolutely. Maybe the first 3 to 6 months, and it might have been mental more than anything, but I physically felt better. I mean, like normal. Like I was playing golf. I was working 10 to 12-hour days, 5 days a week, working weekends if I needed to, in a pretty stressful gig in construction management. Yeah, I felt relative to the average person, like I felt like I was in lockstep with them. I didn't feel like I was handicapped in any way, fortunately, for those 10 years. And then everything changed last summer.
And how was that mental health wise, like coming to accept something that you had seen as very far in the distance?
So on July 11th, I was checked in. My brother just had his baby. And, I just wanted to get home to, hold him, see him. I was really excited. It would have been 10 days after when I realized I'm not going home anymore, like at least for the foreseeable, like for the short term. And I realized how serious things were because when they told me on the Friday before the Sunday night that I would need a transplant, my heart wasn't doing too well. I'm like, there's got to be something you can fix this with drug therapy. Like I'm just starting to get the swelling in the feet and everything that, typically presents with people with heart failure. Like I can't be that quick. And I was in denial, to be honest, until things really fell off the cliff on that Sunday. And even then I didn't know if I was going to make it because at the time, I didn't even qualify for the transplant because my body was compensating in other ways to, for the heart that was failing, and my lung pressures were too high. So the Friday, the right cath, my pressures were okay. By the Sunday, when they checked it again, they were not okay. So I wasn't eligible for a transplant. It wasn't safe to do it. So I needed to get mechanical intervention, which is that left ventricular assisted device, an LVAD, that was an interesting experience altogether on its own.
I was just about to ask, Mally, after the Sunday, what happens like medically to stabilize the patient from the time that you realize, okay, this patient needs a heart transplant, and then until they get their heart transplant? What happens in between?
Yeah, so there are a couple different classes of patients who get listed for transplant, or who we think need a transplant, I should say. And it really depends on how stable that patient is. So we can have patients waiting for a heart transplant who are at home and who are still walking around and doing their daily activities. Or you can have a patient like Vino was waiting for a transplant who is critically ill. And in the case where our patients are critically ill, like Vino was, there are a number of different drug therapies that we can use. One of the ones that Vino was on was a medicine in the IV called milrinone, which actually helps make the heart contract stronger and reduces the pressure that the heart has to pump against. And so he was initially transitioned to milrinone, but milrinone in itself can have side effects. And based on how sick he was, he started getting the side effects of milrinone. So his heart started racing. He developed a new arrhythmia or abnormal heart rhythm that made him feel awful. And ultimately, the next morning, based on the direction that his numbers were going on his blood work, we were seeing that his other organs were not as happy and they were starting to struggle. And so at that point, you have the option, at least fortunately at UHN, we have the option of proceeding to an urgent left ventricular assist device, which is essentially a mechanical heart. And I remember being on the Monday morning, and we had just changed staff, and Dr. Bilia came on, and she looked at me outside of Vino's room. It was 7 a.m, and she said, "What do you want to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'm worried that he's not going to make it if we keep doing what we're doing. And I think maybe we need to be considering a mechanical heart, maybe tomorrow, or what do you think?" She goes, "I think he needs one right now." And so she called the surgeons and she coordinated the surgery, and he went for an LVAD that day, right, Vino?
Your memory's impeccable because that was the exact conversation word for word, because I remember it. It was right outside my room.
She was testing me.
Oh man, she was testing you. That's right. But wow, I can't believe you remembered all of that.
Oh, it was a very emotional day. It was I think it was my second or third week on the fellowship. It was very intense.
Wow. I know for liver, sorry, forgive me for like continuing to bring up these two organs, but they're the only ones that I kind of know anything about. But I know for liver transplant, there's the MELD score. Is there something similar for heart, or is it just these categories of critical or not?
And with that being said, with the MELD score, is there something with liver? My brain is all liver right now as well. But when your liver fails very quickly, it's called fulminant liver failure, and you go directly to the top of the list. Is there something like that as well for heart transplant, or is it, I imagine it's a little bit more complex?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a comparison for heart transplant. So fulminant liver failure, essentially meaning when the liver is severely sick, and it doesn't get more critical than that from a liver perspective. The equivalent of that is what we call cardiogenic shock. Shock meaning that the body is no longer being perfused by the heart. So all of the organs, the liver, the kidneys, the brain, the limbs are no longer getting adequate blood flow to get the oxygen that those organs need. And so they start struggling. And so cardiogenic shock is what Vino was in prior to his mechanical heart. And so because patients with cardiogenic shock have a very high risk of mortality, and because they are, by definition, the sickest type of heart failure patients, they go to the top of the list when listed for transplant. Yes.
We haven't had any heart transplants on the show. And honestly, even though I work in transplant, I don't know a lot about heart transplants to begin with. And I'm assuming Courtney doesn't either, considering she works with like livers and kidneys a lot, right?
Yeah. And my background in communications, wouldn't that be a curveball if I was an expert in heart transplants?
I think one of the reasons, Brittany, that you don't know probably as much about it is that our volumes tend to be much lower than, liver, lung, kidney.
Yeah.
We're usually sort of in the 30 to 40 per year range.
Why is that?
So I think one is the availability of suitable donors. So for heart transplant, for instance, we take younger donors than perhaps my experience, although very limited, looking at the age limit sometimes of lung donors. So I think the donor pool in that way is also a bit smaller. And for us to take a heart, it has to be pretty near perfect. So the testing process of the donor heart is pretty rigorous in that way. And then other reasons why we do less, we really try to maximize the amount of time each of our patients has with their own native heart. The average survival after heart transplant is not forever. It's an average 12 to 15 years. The oldest survivor that we have in our program has had their heart for 34 years.
That's amazing.
And so we try to keep our patients with their own hearts on medical therapy for as long as possible. And sometimes if our recipients run into problems or run into complications with their new heart, we have also had patients who get retransplanted a second time, which to me as a fellow was quite fascinating that that's possible. The other thing too about hearts is they're quite sensitive to the ischemic time. So the amount of time that the organ can be outside of the body before it has to be transplanted. And therefore there is some restriction in terms of how far away we can receive offers from, because the last thing you want to do is have a pristine organ and then leave it outside of the body for too long. And when you put it inside of a new patient, it's not working well because of the ischemic time.
Right. I'm so proud of myself that I actually knew what that term
ischemic
was.
time is.
I was nodding very aggressively. It's like, yes, Mally.
Right. I was supposed to use simple terms. Number of minutes or hours that the heart is going outside of the body without its usual system of perfusion. How's that?
Nice.
Beautiful. Beautiful. How long is heart transplant surgery? Sorry, Britt. Is that what you're going to ask?
I was going to ask that.
Wow.
So it depends on whether it was the first operation that patient has had or whether you are explanting an LVAD. So I myself, of course, do not do the surgeries. We're often in the OR though, at the time our patients go in and witnessing what's happening. So it's quite variable. Sometimes it can be 3.5, 4 hours. Sometimes it can be 8 hours.
Wow. That's quite the difference.
Yeah. And I'm surprised at the 4 hours. That
Me
seems
too.
like so.
I'm actually kind of shocked.
Yeah.
I was just making my boyfriend watch a kidney transplant on YouTube last night, and
Normal stuff. Yeah.
normal stuff. But I was like, yeah, kidneys are the fastest, or like 3-4 hours. But I actually truly had no idea that hearts would. I would imagine that it'd be like 12-15 hours, but I guess not.
The patients who have LVADs to explant take longer because they can have adhesions form. And so you can have more bleeding, you can have a harder time in terms of the dissection, removing the LVAD. And then a big decision or a big contributor to how long the operation lasts, the new heart can be in, and the surgeon can spend a lot of time just trying to stop the bleeding. Depending on what medicines the patient was on before. And, when they leave the OR, they really want to make sure that the surgical bed is dry, because when you close the chest and you go back to the CVICU, if there are still oozing vessels and bleeding there, we can have significant complications and repeat surgery quite quickly, a need for repeat surgery if the bleeding hasn't stopped. So sometimes the process of just cauterizing vessels and making sure there's no more bleeding can take hours.
Wow.
Right. How long can you have an LVAD for? Like, how long can you survive with just a mechanical heart?
So great question. The longest, I believe, in our program has been 8 years. So, there's multiple types of LVAD. There's LVADs as a bridge to candidacy. So, for instance, having high pressures in the lungs, which precludes you from heart transplant. Because if you put a new heart into a patient with high pressure in the lungs, the right heart cannot sustain pumping against those pressures. The right heart fails and it doesn't work. So, bridge to candidacy is when you put in an LVAD in someone that you're hoping will become a candidate for heart transplant. And if that's the case, like Vino, after 3 months, he was listed for transplant. And so he became a candidate, he was listed. And so that was a bridge to candidacy LVAD. There's bridge to transplant, where that patient is a candidate, but you just can't wait for a heart to become available because there's not enough donor hearts for the patients that are waiting. So that's bridge to transplant. There's bridge to decision. And then there's destination therapy, where someone is not a candidate for a heart transplant, but they are a candidate for a mechanical heart. And so it's not really fair to compare length of life with an LVAD in someone who it was just in as a bridge versus someone who it's destination therapy. But the longest patient I'm aware of in our program with an LVAD was 8 years. And there are stories of patients who have had them for longer than that.
Wow.
So can you explain what dilated cardiomyopathy is, just for our listeners?
I want Vino to give it a try.
So my left ventricular, because it wasn't able to eject enough fluid through the heart to pump it through, I guess it dilates, increases in size, so the pressure is less, more flow can get through with less effort, and the heart enlarges to compensate as well. I think is that what basically happens. Am I close, Mally?
That was impressive. Yeah, so it's a type of heart failure where, like Vino said, as the heart weakens, it also dilates. And part of that is the physics of it, improving the heart's ability to survive longer and to survive the conditions it has to work under for longer. There are multiple different types of cardiomyopathy, but dilated cardiomyopathy is one of the more common ones. And, heart failure in itself is a bit of a frustrating term. When you walk into a room and you introduce yourself as the heart failure fellow, you think about it in other specialties. No one introduces himself as the liver failure fellow or the lung failure fellow. So I think that's definitely something I try to get around. I say, hi, I'm Dr. Mally. I'm one of the heart function fellows or one of the heart, transplant fellows. Because otherwise, patients, sometimes if it's their first introduction to the concept, you see their eyes bulge wide open and they're like, what? My heart's failing. And the sound of it sounds as if you're about to die, right? Which often isn't the case.
Dilated cardiomyopathy, is it genetic or congenital? Tell me more about how this came about.
I was leading a pretty normal life, playing sports and everything, up until this weird fever that I had in my second year of university. And I don't know what it was. It was a really bad fever. And then I noticed my cardiac function. I was trying to play basketball and my legs just gave out on me. When you get build lactic acid in your leg and your leg just feels numb.
Yeah.
Like I need to be carried to the car with two guys holding me by both hands. And then unfortunately, my brother got the same fever, but his condition was much worse. He had swelling in his feet like 2-3 months later, and he was really struggling, and he got diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy. And I knew my energy levels had fallen off a cliff, and I didn't understand why until he got diagnosed. And I'm like, I have the exact same thing. I know I do. And then once he got out of the hospital, I went and get myself checked out, and I ended up getting checked into the hospital right after him in 2009, 2010. At the time, we attributed it to potentially viral myocarditis, meaning that it was a virus that caused the transformation of the heart. Idiopathic, meaning they didn't know what kind of virus and when it happened or why. But fast forward 10 years and 3 genetic tests later, this past summer, they did another test against the panel that they have available now. And it seems that it is a genetic disorder that I have with on the X-linked side associated to DMD, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. In this case, showed up in heart failure, well, dilated cardiomyopathy. But even to this day, I'm not sure what state my heart was in prior to that fever to after. I must have had some level of heart failure, but I think it got exasperated post that fever, that specific viral infection.
Right.
Is my thought, but who knows now.
That's our hypothesis too.
So, Vino, you were waiting with your LVAD for 3 months until you got the call for transplants?
Did 3 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, if someone's counting. And yeah, I was fortunate enough. The first call was the call.
That's awesome. Can you walk us through the lead up to the call and into the OR?
Sure. My wife was pregnant at the time, and because of everything going on, she didn't get a baby shower. So her sisters were really pushing for one, and they decided on the Saturday they're going to do it. So the Friday night, we did all the decorations, and my wife goes to me, I'll bet you any money you get a call first thing in the morning for the transplant. We're going to cancel this whole thing. 7:30 in the morning, I missed the call on my phone, and they called my wife right after. And sure enough, it was a call for a transplant. Honestly, we couldn't believe it.
Oh.
But, I was nervous, but excited as well, because although I was stable on the LVAD, I was not enjoying my time on the LVAD. That's my own, it's specifically me as a patient. I'm a little bit thinner, and I had some other complications with it that made it a little bit difficult. But I was really happy to get rid of the device, and I was looking forward to the transplant. But I remember when I did check myself in and they did the blood work, I was getting really nervous. Not cold feet, but nervous. I was really worried again. And Mally had come in at the time. And, she reassured me that things are going to, this is a good match. Things are going to, I think you should do it. And you'll thank yourself at the end of it. And this is what you've been, working towards this whole time. So, just give me that pep talk to push me over. And after that, I was kind of relaxed, to be honest. My wife noticed the difference too.
Wow.
I remember that day like it was yesterday, and all Vino wanted was to drink ginger ale.
Yeah,
and he was told
right.
He's not allowed to have anything to eat or drink by mouth. And he would look at me and he would say, "Can I just have some ginger ale?" I said, "Vino, you can have some ginger ale after the surgery when you wake up." And he's like, "I just want some ginger ale."
So the call was at 7:30. They told me to be there, within the hour if I could. I think I got there just at 8:45. And, the intent was, I think the surgery was supposed to be for that afternoon or evening. It wasn't until the next day. So I was NPO from the night before all the way through, in grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. But I mean, at the time, the ginger ale sounded amazing. It sounded heavenly.
Yeah, they really made you work for that ginger ale. Okay. So, Vino, you said your wife was pregnant when you were being transplanted. How many months was she?
I think she was rolling into her 5th month as the LVAD was put in. I remember we had to do the gender reveal with me in the CVICU room over there at TGH. Actually, we had a baby girl on December 14th. She was 8 months pregnant when I had the transplant on November 8th, and the baby was born December 14th, full term.
What was that experience like in the CVICU when you had the gender reveal?
Mixed emotions, really excited. We're having a daughter. This is finding out for the first time, unfortunate circumstances in the hospital. And my wife already had a plan of what she wanted to do if it was a girl. And we named our baby girl Malia after an MP that we worked with, Meredith, Dr. Mally Worme, and Dr. Bilia.
Oh.
We put the names together and got Malia.
It was actually the most emotional, I think, day we had in the CVICU when Vino's wife started making this speech about how she didn't know if she was going to be a single parent and how she wasn't sure that her baby was going to be able to meet her dad. And, the whole room is all teary-eyed before they even tell us that they're going to name the baby after Meredith, Dr. Bilia, and myself. It was quite something.
And those are the people we've met and worked with the most, but it's more of an homage to the whole team, because everybody who met on that team, honestly, can't name one person that didn't stand out to me. Top down, everybody was just an amazing team to work with to get me back on my feet.
I was just lucky that I met you in the beginning.
That's right. I was lucky that I met you at the beginning.
Oh,
Best friends over here. That's so beautiful. So you guys planned that, like when you were on the LVAD and planning her pregnant, like going through the pregnancy, you guys planned the names?
The gender reveal was a week after my LVAD. There wasn't much thought to names at all, boy or girl at the time. I'm not gonna lie, at the time, I was rooting for a boy because, for me, the dilated cardiomyopathy was a death sentence, honestly. Like, I was aiming to hit, 40. Things were good. I was doing well at work, got my life together, and I knew I was putting away some money just in case something were to happen to me. The reason for the baby boy was, just another, male around to help my wife out, with chores around the house, shoveling the snow, stuff like that. Not that a daughter couldn't do it, just that, boys are meant to do that, If I had a son, he'd be out there right now shoveling, 3 months old. Can't do that with my daughter. My daughter is too precious. And, I was having a baby. I just wanted to get through the first few years with her and, set her with a nest egg of some kind to get her through university. So it was all short-term goals.
How do you let that version of things go now that you've had to transplant, now that things look a bit brighter?
Well, the best way to describe it is I hold my baby in the middle of the night and she's crying and it doesn't bother me. I'm just glad I could do it.
If you could bottle that appreciation and gratitude, it would be absolutely priceless. I just love that that's your outlook and that you have gone through this experience so optimistic and so inspiring for other people and other patients.
I don't know if I'm too much of an inspiration yet. I got a long way to go still, but I'm glad I've made it this far.
So humble.
Yeah.
Every time one of our patients wants to talk about transplant or VAD, I'm like, I know the perfect person.
I think everything that happened that summer kind of gave me a different outlook on life. Me and my brother, we help each other a lot, but we aren't close. We fight a lot like most brothers, especially we're 1 year apart. So very competitive. Anyways, we just didn't get along. My brother, as I mentioned, has dilated cardiomyopathy as well. And he's unfortunately experiencing similar issues to me and just recently got an LVAD put in. And he's actually at TGH at the moment. After the LVAD and everything that happened, like for both of us, I think none of the old stuff ever mattered. We've been closer than ever. And like, I talk to him almost every day now since he's been in the hospital too. I actually saw him twice and, gave him those pep talks, we're going to get through this, like the diet, the workout regimen, like, the exercise and everything. Just, as he has to get through these next 2 weeks on his own, and after that, I'll be different.
Yeah, we've had an interview with a patient who has cystic fibrosis, and his brother actually also has cystic fibrosis. And we asked him, how has that been for you and your brother? And he's just said, I feel like I don't want him to go through the same things that I went through, so I can just help him and support him through everything. It's interesting when siblings can bond over things like that.
Yeah,
yeah, he's lucky in some ways. Hopefully he doesn't have the same feeling that it's a death sentence, seeing where you are now and the things that you've gone through with transplant. Like hopefully that's a source of hope for him.
Well, for him, it's funny how we both ended up in the same space 10 years apart, but we took different roads to get there. Like, as Mally mentioned, I didn't have as many of the symptoms that are typical with people with dilated cardiomyopathy. So I was able to lead a pretty normal life. Fortunately, he was too, but he had a lot of ups and downs. Like I mentioned, he had some early onset of the more common symptoms and a little bit more aggressive than mine. And he had multiple hospitalizations where they contemplated transplant, 2015, 2016. And luckily, he responded to drug therapy and was able to bounce back both times and get this far. We were able to bond over the health issues that we have and also the new chapter in our lives with our children coming into the fold.
And are you able to do high impact activities, or can you golf again? Like if there was snow outside, could you go out and...
That's the hope. I think this summer that I should be able to recover to a point where I'm hoping to be able to golf again. I feel like I'm there. It's been a very positive recovery. I've been doing really well, I think. And I think from the clinic side as well, I think Mally would agree, I hope.
Yes, I definitely would agree that you've been doing excellent.
Yeah, and I've had my ups and downs, but definitely trending upwards.
I'm so happy to hear this. Like, this is a great story. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for your daughter and your wife. I would ask Mally, what's your favorite part of your job? But I think
you get it.
This, right? I would think that your favorite part of the job is having a baby named after you one day.
Yeah, if you had told me that's what my heart failure fellowship would bring, I would have been like, okay, sign me up.
Right.
I was not expecting that, obviously. I think that the best part of the job is when we successfully achieve what Vino's achieved, and that is having a patient who is super sick, and even as a medical team, not being sure whether we're going to be able to stabilize them, and then seeing them when they come back for their biopsies and seeing them in clinic as they start talking about wanting to drive again and wanting to go back to work, and seeing this incredible transition and the emotions that come along with that, and that's definitely the most rewarding part of the job. And it's not always happy.
Yeah.
It's not always positive. And some days I ask myself, is this really what I want to be doing? Because it can be very challenging when it's not happy and when things go wrong, but it's high stakes, and with that comes the ups and the downs.
So what do you think is the biggest misconception that surrounds heart transplants?
So that's a great question. I think one of the biggest things that's important to talk about with heart transplant is there aren't enough donors for the number of patients that need hearts. Mm-hmm. And just because someone has end-stage heart failure, and if we think they would be a candidate for heart transplant, doesn't mean that we're going to be able to find a match for them before it's too late. And if there's anyone out there who's questioned or considered or wanted to know more about becoming a donor, I would highly encourage them to read more about it, to look at the beadonor.ca website.
Absolutely. Donors are incredible people. Vino, have you given any thought to writing to your donor? Have you heard from your donor family?
So that's something I've been looking forward to doing, and it's on the to-do list. With the baby, things have been in flux, and even with my health, it's still not 100%. I'm getting there though. Definitely on my to-do list. Actually, at my appointment tomorrow, I was looking to inquire with the team to figure out how much information I can get and how to begin the process, because things are finally, slowly starting to settle down for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I guess it is still pretty early.
Also, just, even when I think about what I want to say, just there's no way to put it into words sometimes.
Totally. Where do you start?
I still don't know what I want to write.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I wish I could meet the family and thank them in person, but I know that's not how things work. So it is what it is. I have to find a way to find the words for them.
Brittany and I are dorks, and we've started playing this game where we're trying to guess everyone's zodiac sign who's on the podcast. I have a terrible track record. Brittany, I think, is one up from me.
Okay, I have it. Right? Yeah, with Topeka. I have an intuition about Vino. I think Vino's a Libra.
I think I'm a Capricorn. I'm not really sure.
When's your? Oh, well, you don't have to tell us.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I'm in January 2nd. What's that put me?
You're a Capricorn.
You're a Capricorn.
All right.
I would have never have guessed that. Okay. No. And Mally, let's see.
Is Mally a Libra?
Very close. I'm a Virgo.
Oh man, you stink, Britt.
Very close.
Well, I'm a Virgo.
Are you?
Well, I'm half, so.
Well, she's a Virgo and it suits her.
What's your birthday?
I'm a Leo Virgo. I'm August 23rd, so I'm on the cusp. So.
Gotcha. I'm September 9th.
Okay.
So Britt, you said you identify as a Leo, so
I do identify as a Leo, but I was trying to identify as a Virgo because Mally's a Virgo, and I was, I'm like, oh,
I was really feeling the connection there.
Sorry. I identify as a Leo. I do, but people that read my sign are like, based on your birth chart, like, girl, you are a Virgo. I'm like, I'm not, but
I'm not going to take any offense to that. We're just going to flow with it.
But Virgos actually are very nurturing.
I've read that.
Yeah, I should have picked up on that because I just said that. I'm like, whatever. Anyways, we're still learning, okay?
I didn't say we were experts. Learning. I said we're dorks. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just dorks.
Maybe we can just end on one last question. What's something you would tell someone who has maybe just been diagnosed with something that they consider a death sentence, or has just had their LVAD put in, or, you know, is looking at heart transplant in the future, whether it's very close or very far away, and is just conflicted about it? What's something
I remember 10 years ago when I was first diagnosed, and the word transplant even came up. Despair. It was very scary, but now in the year 2020, things are very different. And 10 years from prior, or even now, it isn't what we probably think it is what I would probably say to them. And we need to be educated more, and we'll learn more. And like Matt said, it's unfortunate that the list of patients needing transplant is longer than the available organs, but I think over time that'll improve as the word gets out, and the success stories, and how it impacts our lives. And me being able to hold my daughter hopefully convinces one other person to enlist their organs for donation. Hopefully.
The most persuasive thing I've ever heard. So I'm already an organ donor, but I would sign up again.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for giving us your time, both of you, Mally and Vino.
It was a pleasure. This was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks
all
for having
so
me,
much.
and thanks for inviting me, Mally.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for having us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Living Transplant. If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, email us at livingorgandonation@uhn.ca.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Living Transplant on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And follow us at Give Life UHN on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
See you next time.